tubers, oil seeds, and sugar crops. The scope of this lecture, the scope of the lecture we have discussed, understanding the students should be able to understand soil and climatic requirements for of major arable crops, growth as in crop growth factors, field preparation and production practices, weed, pest and disease management, harvesting, processing, storage, marketing and utilization, case study of cassava, cowpea and maize that's in wheat season, practical understanding of integrated pest management for as an integrated pest management strategies for pests of for field crops, soil, climatic and growth requirements of major arable crops, soil requirements, well-drained loamy soils preferred for most cereals and legumes, clay loams preferred for tuber. Example of tuber, includes the cassava and yams. Sandy loams, favorable for groundnut and cowpea and others in that class. Deep fertile soil, as deep fertile soils rich in organic matter improves yield. Soil pH between 5.5 to 7.0, optimal for most arable crops. For rice, lowland soils, hydromorphic soils, or upland soils, depending on the variety of the rice. Climatic requirements. Let's take from temperature. Maize requires 18 to 32 degrees centigrade. Rice requires 20 to 35 degrees centigrade. Sorghum requires 25 to 35 degrees centigrade. Is drought tolerant. Sorghum is very drought tolerant. Cassava 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. That's for temperature. For rainfall, maize requires 600 to 900 millimeters of rainfall. Rice, that's for the lowland rice, it requires about 1,000 to 2,000 millimeters of rainfall. Cowpea requires 5,000 to 7,000 millimeters of rainfall. Sunlight. All arable crops require high solar radiation for photosynthesis and green filling. Yeah, sunlight is very, very important for in every arable crop for photosynthesis and grain feeding. If there's no adequate sunlight, grain feeding will be very, very poor. Growth requirements, adequate seed to soil contact. For a seed to germinate, there must be adequate seed to soil contact. There must be that contact for a seed to germinate. Proper seed rate and spacing. If you're planting and you're not planting at the right seed rate and spacing, you're only creating problem for the farmer, for yourself as a farmer, and the crops you're planting, because inadequate seed rate would either mean that the spacing will be so much that there'll be waste of resources, or if the spacing is so close, the crops will be competing for sunlight, nutrient, water, and all whatnot. So, proper seed rate and spacing, I've mentioned that. Good drainage, except rice. Yeah, good drainage is very, very important, except in rice. Rice is a water loving crop, but every other crop, there should be proper drainage. There should be adequate drainage. Timely weeding. Weeding is very, very essential for your crops to grow very well and perform optimally. If you're not weeding, or if you're not weeding, or you're weeding but not weeding timely, you're only creating room for your crops to compete with weeds for the for manure, space, and sunlight. Soil fertility management is another group requirement. Pests and disease control at critical growth stages. These are very, very important for growth, growth as part of the growth requirements of crops. Now, improved varieties of major arable crops in Nigeria and Africa. Maize, there are a few there are many improved varieties. Let me not say a few. We have the Oba Super series. We have Oba Super 2, Oba Super 3, Oba Super 6, and all the that's the Oba series, or Oba Super series. We have the Ife hybrid series. We have the Samaz, that's from IITA and the ADP. We have the QPM. Yeah, that's a QPM, means quality protein maize. So these are the few four improved varieties of maize I've listed here. As for rice, we have the Faro 44, we have Faro 52, we have Faro 60. That's the Nerica. So, and we have upland and lowland varieties depending on ecology. On the ecology, yeah. For sorghum and the millet, we have improved drought tolerant OPVs and hybrids. Example, the Samsung series, the Samsung series. For cassava, we have plenty of them. We have the TMS, that's the Tropical Money Hot series, TMS 30 30572. We have the TMS 419. We have the TME1. That's very high yielding and disease resistant. For the cowpea, we have ITA and IT varieties from IITA. We are early maturing, and the striga resistant. You know, the striga is a very it's let me use the word a pest of crop. Yeah, the striga, they are resistant to striga. We have the sugar cane. We have the high sucrose content varieties from NRCI at Omodike, and the international introductions. Production practices for major arable crops. We have land preparation. We have for land preparation, we have bush clearing, plowing, harrowing, ridging, or mounding, depending on the crop. Yeah, in some cases we do ridging. In some cases we do mounding, depending on the crop. For rice, we do the lowland. We have the pudding for transplanting. So the second production practice is after the land preparation is planting, planting itself. That's appropriate seed rate and spacing. Okay, the appropriate seed rate and spacing for different crops. Maize, we have 75 cm by 25 cm. That's one plant per stand. But if you want to plant more than one plant per stand, like two plants per stand, then you should be talking about 1 meter by 1 meter. 1 meter by 1 meter for maize if you're planting two plants per stand. But if you're planting one plant per stand, 1 meter, 75 cm by 25 cm should be ideal. Cowpea 60 by 20 cm. Cassava 1 meter by 1 meter. Rice direct seeding or transplanting depending on the ecology. So yeah, I will explain this ecology later. What I mean by depending on the ecology, I will explain it later. So okay, let me look at are there questions before I continue with fertilization? Please, before I continue, ensure that you are staying for this lecture. I can see only 7 persons in this. Note I am taking attendance. For those of you who will just log in and go out immediately, I am taking attendance for my students. But for those who are not my students, yeah, there's no problem. But for my students who are critical part of this class, you must stay from the beginning of this lecture till the end. It's just a 45 minutes lecture. So in case you've just logged in and left, I am noting those of you who are staying online. So let's continue. Let's continue. Okay. So let's talk about fertilization. Based on soil test, yeah, you apply your fertilizer based on soil test. You don't just apply fertilizer to arable crops without first of all testing your soil to know the fertility status of your soil. So based on soil test, but general guides for maize, you apply NPK at 120 to 60 120 to 60 is to 60 kg per hectare. What that means is that for a hectare of for 1 hectare of maize, you apply 120 kg nitrogen, 60 kg of phosphorus as in the P, and 60 kg of the K, potassium. For rice, that's the same the same NPK 90 45 45. For cassava, NPK 15 15 15 at 4,000 to 6,000 kg per hectare, depending on the soil. I repeat, depending on the soil. So organic amendments, compost, manure, they all improve soil structure. They are all very, very important in arable crop production. Let's talk about irrigation and water use. Maize and cowpea requires supplementary irrigation around flowering. Yeah, irrigation is very, very important around flowering. One thing that if there's inadequate irrigation around the time of flowering of maize and cowpea, the resultant effect will be poor filling, for poor milking and poor filling of the pods of the cobs. So there should be, if your maize and cowpea must lack water, it's it should not be uh around the time of flowering. There must be adequate irrigation at flowering. Rice requires controlled water regime, flooding for lowland types. Yeah, for the lowland type of rice, the lowland varieties, they need flooding. Like we call them in our native parlance, I would say they should be planted in swamps, yeah, in flooded places. Drip irrigation recommended for high value crops where feasible. Avoid waterlogging for most upland crops. For most upland crops, avoid waterlogging, except for rice. I stress that, except for rice. Weed control. We have the manual weed method of controlling weed. You weed first at 2 weeks to 4 weeks after planting. Then second weeding should be around 6 to 8 weeks after planting. Herbicides, even though I'm not an advocate of use of herbicides, but we have the pre-emergence herbicides, example the atrazine for maize. We have the post-emergence emergence depending on the crop. Yeah, these herbicides depends on sometimes they are crop specific. You need to know the one to apply to which crop. We also have the cultural method, like the use of cover cropping, mulching, and the proper spacing. You know, when you use cover crops, they help to do what suppress them weeds. You mulch, that one mulch and suppress weeds very, very perfectly. And the proper spacing too. If you space out your crop so much, then weed becomes a problem. Standard spacing is very, very important for weed control. Now let's look at diseases and pests of some of these arable crops. Common examples for maize, we have the armyworm, we have the stem borer, we have the leaf blight. Please, after this lecture, I will upload a video of what an armyworm, of the one that ravage our maize in Nigeria. I will upload a video of about just 30 seconds or 40 seconds. That's the video, the one we removed from our faculty farm the other day. So you see what the armyworm looks like. So first, I continue again. Common examples for maize, we have the armyworm, we have the stem borer, we have the leaf blight. For rice, we have the blast, we have stem borers, we have sheet blight. For cowpea, we have aphids, we have pod borers, we have the mosaic virus. Yeah, we have the mosaic virus. For cassava, We have the cassava mosaic disease. We have the millibug. These ones you should be very, very aware of because cassava is it's is one of the most common crops around Nigeria, especially the southern Nigeria. So we have the cassava mosaic disease and the mealybugs and control measures discussed in the IPM session. So when we get to the IPM session, you would I will tell you about the control measures of these pests and diseases of common arable crops in Nigeria and Africa. So harvesting, processing, storage, and marketing of field crops. Let's start from harvesting. Harvesting at physiological maturity to minimize, yeah, harvest at physiological maturity to minimize losses. One question is, what is physiological maturity? I will explain that in towards. Okay, now let me say talk about it now. Physiological maturity is that stage where the crop is actually fully mature, like fully ripe. Maybe let's say let's use things like maybe fruits now as an instance. You will see something like an orange is still looking green. Or okay, let me not use the orange. Let's use something like tomato. It's still looking green, but the farmer still what harvest. The farmer still harvest and keep it to do what ripen over time. The farmer knows that yeah, this particular tomato is how actually ripe, like I don't know, is actually mature, fully mature. That's physiologically it has attained what maturity, but not yet ripened. You can harvest at that stage. In your cowpea, once they are physiologically, once they are mature, you don't need to wait until they turn purely brown before you do what? Before harvesting. If you wait for them to turn purely brown before harvesting, that means the losses will be much in the field. They will be what? They'll be shattering in the field. So once they turn yellow, you don't need to wait for them to turn brown before harvesting. Once they turn yellow, at that stage, you say they've attained physiological what? Maturity, and you can harvest. So that's about harvesting. Harvest at physiological maturity to minimize what? Losses. Even things like rice, you don't need to wait until the rice turns purely brown and dry on the on the grass, on the rice grass. If you do that, then means plenty of the seeds, the rice grains will do what? Fall on the ground and the losses will be what? Much. So to minimize such losses, harvest once they turn what? Yellow to what? Brown. Don't allow them to stay there until they are fully 100% ripened. So minimize the second one is use simple tools like sickle, knife, or mechanized options where available. For cassava, harvest 10 to 12 months depending on the variety. Let's talk briefly about processing. This is very, very important to me because most farmers run losses in their farm, not because they are not doing well, but because they are not processing. They do what they produce and sell raw, which is not the best for a farmer, which is not the best for the farmer. So the farmer should be able to do what? Process to a little extent if you cannot process fully. So for maize, you do the shelling and the drying. Rice, do the threshing, milling, and polishing. Very important. So you see some farmers, they will just harvest their rice, dry it, and sell it that way. Another person will do the threshing, after the another person will do the milling and the polishing, which is not and now sell at a more exorbitant price. So for cassava, peeling, grating, fermenting, and drying, you can garify too, or can process into flour. So these are some processing some things you can do to increase your earning, the money you make from your farm produce. Sugarcane, that one you crushing and juice extraction. So let's talk about storage. Dry grains to 12 to 13% moisture content, or let me raise it by 1%. Between 12 and 14% moisture content. This is very important. The grains should be properly dry to avoid to reduce the risk of those consuming them eating aflatoxins. Aflatoxins are not good for human consumption. So, and one of the ways to reduce aflatoxin from grains like groundnut and all the rest of them is by drying what very very well, drying to 12%, between 12% and 14% moisture content. Use sacks, cribs, silos, or airtight containers for your storage. Apply hermetic storage. Yeah, apply hermetic storage to avoid chemical contamination. Marketing and utilization. Marketing and utilization. Market outlets, rural markets, aggregators, and millers. Utilization. Utilization, yeah, for me is you process yes for food, feed, and industry. Rice, household consumption, breweries. Cassava for gari, fufu, and industrial starch. Cowpea, that's for protein source and flour. Sugarcane for sugar, ethanol, and molasses. You know what molasses? What molasses is, or molasses are. So maybe we'll discuss that also in our next class. And you do me one favor, drop your questions here, because your questions here will determine what we are going to discuss in our next class. So let's look at pest and disease. Pest and disease. Let's look at pest and disease. Okay, someone asked a question here. Please, sir, is cowpea purple or brown in color? I'll come to that. I'll answer your questions. I'll take all of them at once. Okay. Uh, Pest, diseases, and weed management strategies. Now we have different ways of managing pests, diseases, and weeds. We have the chemical control, we have the cultural control, we have the biological control, we have the others. But let me be taking them immediately instead of keeping. Let me take them. Okay, we have the chemical control. You select appropriate herbicide, pesticides, follow label instructions, use knapsack sprayers properly, avoid residual and environmental contamination. This is very, very important. Select appropriate pesticides, follow label instructions, use knapsack sprayers properly, avoid residual and environmental contamination. That's about chemical control. Cultural control. Crop rotation can help. Resistant varieties very important. Clean planting materials very necessary. Early planting very very good. It helps a lot. Sanitation, that's destroying infected what debris. Yeah, destroying infected what debris. That's about cultural control. Biological control, the use of predators, parasitoids, beneficial fungi, and bacteria. You know what predators are. There are some ants or some plants that eat other ants that eat other plant other ants. So you can use them to do what, eradicate what, pests in your farm. Release of natural enemies. Yeah, release of natural enemies. That's another biological control method. Host plant resistance. Yeah, use varieties bred for resistance against striga, blight, and mosaic diseases, etc. Most of these crops have the varieties bred for resistance against some common pests, diseases, and all the rest of them. So try to use resistant what varieties. They help a lot, especially in this time when climate change has caused a lot of problem to farmers. So try to use what resistant varieties. Don't say this pest is not available here for now. No, always go for the resistant varieties. You never can tell when the pest and diseases with them. There will be pest and disease outbreak in the region. So integrated pest management. What is integrated pest management? Okay, let's say this integrated means a combination of all the above listed methods of combating pest disease and weeds. So integrated means all these things put together. So we combine all of them and call them integrated what pest management. Now, one of them is monitoring and scouting, cultural practices, biological control, resistant varieties, chemical control, which is usually the last resort. Chemical control should be the last resort. Don't always resort to use of chemical at first. Try to explore cultural, biological, resistant varieties and monitoring and like hand picking of some, you know, chemical control should be your last option anytime you're trying to handle pests and diseases and weeds too. So let's look at case studies, farm practices in wheat season production. For instance, cassava production. Planting at onset of rains, very important. Use improved varieties like the TMS series. Apply NPK 1515 early. Weed at 3 to 3 and 6 weeks, very important. Harvest 10 to 12 months, depending on the variety. Cowpea production. Plant early to avoid peak pest pressure. Plant early to avoid peak pest pressure. Here in Nigeria, if you're planting a cowpea, you should plant in such a way that you will harvest before the rain becomes very intense. Because when the rain is at its peak, that is when pests and diseases are also at its peak because of the high humidity. So if you can plant and your your cowpea matures when there's less rain and lower relative humidity, the tendency that your crops will not be highly infected will be very, very what much. It's better to plant early to avoid peak what pest pressure. Provide minimal fertilization for legumes. Yeah, provide minimal fertilization. You know, most legumes don't uh, don't like so much nitrogen. Okay, they can produce nitrogen on their own. Yeah. So adding so much nitrogen again might would make them, for those of them that you need the pots, it may encourage vegetative growth at the expense of population. Spray only when necessary. Spray only when necessary. IPM is the best. Harvest by hand picking pods. For maize, for maize production, early land clearing and timely planting, early basal fertilizer and top dressing at knee height. Control armyworm early. Harvest at full dryness to avoid what? Rot. Harvest at full dryness to avoid rot. That is for those doing commercial okay maize that will be that is going to be processed into other things. But for someone who is growing maize for the one that's going to be eating raw, harvest when they are still very what fresh and let me use the word juicy. So these are the few case studies here. In conclusion, crop husbandry provides the foundation for understanding the production and management of arable crops in Nigeria. Students must be able to interpret soil and climatic requirements, execute proper field operations, and apply IPM strategies in sustainable crop production. Okay, having concluded, let me go back and take some questions from you from viewers. Let's look at questions. This one says, please, is cowpea purple or brown in color? Cowpeas are brown when they are mature, when they are dried. Yeah, they are brown when they are mature. They turn brown. When they dry, they turn very, very brown. Yeah. They, so I hope that answers your question. Cowpea turns brown when they dry and mature. At a stage, they are green when they are still growing. That's for the pods. They are green when they are still growing. I think that's the only question I can see here. That's all. Okay. Any other question, please? Any other question? I'm waiting for questions. So that uh would okay, that's fine. Only let's check our analytics and see those who please, sir, does all the varieties of cowpea have one color? There are so many improved varieties of cowpea. There are so many improved varieties of cowpea, and when it depends on the variety, but they are relatively green. Yeah, yeah. But the pods may vary from slightly brown to dark brown, and that's when mature. But the pods are green when they are still immature, when they are still very, very young. That's a good question there. Let's look at our analytics and sir, you said we should harvest before our crops ripen. I don't get that part. Well, cause of network. Sir, can you explain that part again? Okay, I said, okay, sir, you said we should harvest before our crops ripen. Yeah, I said you harvest at physiological maturity. You don't need to wait for your crops to uh, fully ripen in the field, especially for those who are doing commercial agriculture. Let's take, for instance, let's analyze it this way. You are a tomato grower and you have an acre or a hectare of land filled with tomato, and you want to wait until all of them ripen before harvesting. The implication of that kind of decision is that most of the tomatoes will be wasted in the field, because by the time they're fully ripened and you're harvesting, before you move from your farm to where you're going to maybe clean them, package them, and take them to the market, a lot would have what rotten. But if you harvest when they are physiologically mature, but some are still very what a bit yellow, some are still green, but you know that they've initiated them ripen a little, and you harvest at that stage. The tendency is that the tomatoes harvested at that level can travel longer distance, stay longer days in the market before what spoiling. Yeah, to avoid losses, harvest when what crops are physiologically what mature. You don't need to wait until they're fully ripened. Now, you may or may not have seen a cowpea farm. In a cowpea farm, if you mistakenly allow your cowpea to fully ripen and turn brown the way it should be in the field before harvesting, a lot of them will shatter, and you'll not be able to do what? Pick them. A lot of them will shatter. So when once they start turning brown, once they start turning brown, a yellowish, yeah, yellowish to from green to yellow to brown. Once you see that they start turning from yellow, yeah, from green to yellow, you start harvesting, you start picking, because you're going to hand pick. You're going to hand pick. except your farm is mechanized. You're going to hand pick. So the tendency is that if you allow them to over ripen in the field, then you're going to lose a greater percentage of the cowpea in the field. You're going to lose them because they will shatter. Once the sun comes out, all will be hearing pa, 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 pa. They just be what? Shattering. That's why it's always good to harvest before they are what? Fully ripened. But things like maize, for those who are doing commercial maize production, not only the not those who are producing for roasting or the green corn that we eat, the one we eat fresh. You allow your corn to do what? Ripen very, very well in the field and dry. Yeah, to avoid mold growing on them. So, but most arable crops, you harvest them before they are fully ripe. You don't allow them to fully ripen in the field. Yeah, the essence is to do what? To reduce wastage. So let me conclude. There are only 12 people here. There are only 12 people in this class, and which is okay. I think if there is no other question, would if there is no other question, would call it a day. If there is no other question, okay. I think we are done. All right. Thanks to the two of you that joined my class this morning. I really appreciate. God bless you for joining our class. Hope to meet you on. Um, hope to meet you here again. Probably on Thursday. Hope to meet you here again on Thursday to put finishing touches to some gray areas, and please do well to subscribe, follow me because I always drop updates here, things, tips on how to succeed in agriculture. I always drop updates on things to do and succeed in agriculture, especially for young farmers, Nigerian students. Yeah, this YouTube channel is for you to learn. If you check my previous posts, they are all about things you can do to be self-employed, self-sufficient in agriculture, and uh, so always do well to recommend our page. Come here whenever you have any problem about concerning agriculture, especially in the tropics, and ask your questions. So thanks, and God bless the 12 of you who attended this lecture. I am grateful you did. Thanks, and